Hi, and welcome to That's Ready Mysterious. Join me for an intriguing look into real-life mysteries. Who was the mad gasser of Mattoon? What was whaling at the Wilga waterhole? I'm not going to solve those mysteries, but they'll be interesting to learn about. I'm your host, Kelly with an I. Transcripts and references for all episodes can be found at that'sreadymysterious.wordpress.com. No apostrophe and no exclamation point. Today's tale is about Kaspar Hauser. The November 1874 issue of Overland Monthly and Out West magazine wrote, "One of the strangest stories of the century is that of Kaspar Hauser. For a quarter of a century, 1828 to 1853, it is doubtful if any single individual in all of Europe was so much discussed or awoke so great an interest and curiosity. The newspapers on both sides of the ocean were full of him. Pamphlets and books were printed to sustain this or that theory of his birth and belongings. Philanthropers, philosophers, and savants were aroused on his behalf." Who was Kaspar Hauser? On May 26, 1828, a boy, aged about 16, came out of the woods near Nuremberg in Bavaria, Germany. He was wearing pantaloons, a silk necktie, a waistcoat, a gray jacket, and boots that were torn so badly that his mangled feet were protruding from them. He carried with him a handkerchief with the initials KH embroidered on it, as well as an envelope with 2 letters inside. The boy said he had grown up in a small, dark cell. When asked about his life, he said he didn't know who he was or where he came from. He could only say his name, Kaspar Hauser. The letters that Hauser carried confused everyone, the authorities and public alike. The first letter was addressed to the captain of the 4th Squadron of the 6th Cavalry Regiment, Captain von Wessenig. The letter said that Hauser should be taught to read and write as well as the Christian religion, but that he should be kept closely confined. It said that he didn't have any parents, but if he had them, he would have been a learned man. The letter ended saying that if the author had escorted Hauser to Nuremberg himself, it would have cost him his neck. It suggested that von Wessenig could either take Hauser in or hang him. It was supposedly written by a poor laborer who found and raised the boy to that point. The second letter was from Hauser's mother to his prior caretaker and was dated 1812. It said that Hauser's name was Kaspar and that he was born on April 30th, 1812. It said that he wanted to become a horseman like his father, who the letter said had been a cavalry of the 6th Regiment. Hauser claimed that the letters were written by prior caretakers, but that they were not biologically related to him. There were a lot of problems with the letters, but there was one glaring problem with them. They could not have been authentic, because von Wessenig was not an army captain in 1812 when the letters were written. A shoemaker by the name of Weichmann took Kaspar Hauser to Captain von Wessenig. All Hauser would say was, "I want to be a cavalryman as my father was," and "Horse, horse." He answered all the other questions with "don't know." Von Wessenig took Hauser to the police. The people who were watching him said that he acted like a child. He walked like a toddler just learning to walk. They said he was definitely not a madman or an idiot. He only spoke to repeat words and phrases and had a small vocabulary, mainly containing words related to horses. When a candle was brought to him, he stared in wonder at it and tried to grab the flame. He was also enthralled by his reflection in the mirror. Although his feet were damaged during his time before he emerged from the woods, they were still soft. Some people believed that Hauser was a feral child who raised himself in the forest. Kaspar Hauser was held in the town prison as a vagabond for 2 months. While there, he confused anyone who met him. The mayor said that he was making progress, but that he didn't like any food but bread and water. Hauser was made a ward of the city and entered into the custody of Lord Stanhope, a British nobleman, in 1832. There, he learned to effectively communicate, as well as learning how to read and write within several weeks. 1 year later, he published his autobiography, in which he claimed to have spent his whole life in a small, dark room, sleeping on straw and being fed by strangers that he didn't see. Hauser began to explain how he was raised in a prison. He said the cell was just about 2 meters or 6 feet long by 1 meter or 3 feet wide and just over 1 meter or 3.5 feet high. He was only given a straw bed to sleep on. He said that he was left with bread and water to eat and drink. The water tasted bitter and put him into a long sleep. He talked of having a dream in which he was in a huge castle accompanied by lavishly dressed women and a man in all black who carried a sword. A professor who was working with Hauser thought that it might be a memory rather than a dream. Hauser said that when he was set free, he never saw the face of the man who brought him into the outskirts of Nuremberg. He was forced to look at the ground the whole time and was then handed the letters, and the man left. Kaspar Hauser was put into the custody of the professor who was studying him, Friedrich Daume. Daume was a schoolmaster and an artist talented in drawing. He discovered that Hauser too was talented when it came to drawing. Daume performed experiments on Hauser, but didn't learn much about him. On October 17, 1829, Kaspar Hauser was found in Daume's basement bleeding from a head wound. He said that he recognized the voice of his attacker as the man who had brought him to Nuremberg in the first place. The mysterious figure told Hauser, "You still have to die ere you leave the city of Nuremberg," and then he disappeared. Kaspar Hauser's death was just as tragic and mysterious as his emergence from the forest. There were several attempts on his life. The first was in October of 1829 in the basement of Daume's house. While alone in the cellar, he got a cut to his forehead. Once, when he was alone in a room, an assailant that no one saw and who Hauser couldn't describe shot at him. Hauser later admitted that he shot himself. Then, on December 17, 1833, Hauser burst through the door of his Ansbach home holding his side. He was talking about how he'd been lured to the park by a stranger and that the stranger then stabbed him in the side. At first, no one believed him. He had been alone in the public gardens when someone, who no one else saw, stabbed him in the stomach. When he tried to bring his friends to the location where he was when he was stabbed, he collapsed and died. The evidence at the scene of the crime included a small purse with a handwritten note inside detailing the location of the attacker's hometown. Hauser had claimed that the attacker gave it to him. There wasn't a second set of footprints at the scene. Some people say that Hauser's death was the most famous unsolved mystery of the 19th century. Hauser was buried on Ansbach Cemetery in Germany. His tombstone reads, "Here lies Kaspar Hauser, riddle of his time. His birth was unknown and his death mysterious." Who was Kaspar Hauser? There are several theories. The first is that he was a lost prince. He could have been the son of Grand Duke Karl von Baden and his wife, Stephanie de Beauharnais, and he could have been adopted by Napoleon. Some believe that he was an impostor looking for fortune and fame. The letters he carried with him appeared to have been written in Hauser's own hand. It's possible that he was an undiagnosed epileptic. Some of his visions and claims could have been caused by a medical condition. Some even think Hauser may have been driven mad by neglect and abuse. In 1998, DNA tests were performed on samples that had been taken from Hauser's bloodstained shirt, as well as samples from 2 of Beauharnais' living relatives. The result showed that Hauser was not a Prince of Baden. Later tests, however, which were performed in the early 2000s, sampled Hauser's hair and said that he could be related to the Badens. In 2024, a definitive DNA was provided after sampling the hair again. Mitochondrial DNA showed that Hauser had no relation to the Baden family. He was not the kidnapped prince. There was one thing about Kaspar Hauser that was absolutely true. He was a liar. He frequently told tall tales, and he lied about his upbringing. His story could not have been true, or he would have been more debilitated than he was. He would have been suffering from rickets when he emerged from the forest. Who was Kaspar Hauser? Where did he come from? Was he really held in a tiny cell for most of his life? What do you think? Leave a comment and let me know what you think. Thanks for listening to today's episode of That's Ready Mysterious. Join me next week for another captivating mystery.